Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. Chipollino by Gianni Rodari. Chipollino is a unique story in which the author depicts the lives of various animals, but the protagonists originate from the realm of plants, making it a fable. Chipollino, onion in Italian, and his buddies zucchini, pear, blueberry, parsley, strawberry, and others are battling the tyrant lemon, the countess's cherry, and the manager of the castle tomato. As in many fables, the entire story is a metaphor for human beings. In reality, the plot revolves around the interplay of power and oppression, as well as freedom and fairness, between the rich and the poor. Even the most villainous characters in the novel are made humorous by the story's upbeat tone. The novel was written with children in mind, and the author made an effort to explain complex concepts in terms that young readers could grasp. Chipollino lends a hand as he tries to make a point about how precious freedom is and how we should treasure it while we still have it. All of the characters are linked to some kind of fruit or vegetable, and the action takes place in a wolf-infested village in a made-up land. Because of the simultaneous existence of castles, railroads, bicycles, and carriages, the concept of time is also invented. Parades were held as the King Lemon was about to arrive in the city. The elderly Cipollone was among the crowd awaiting the entrance of the king when he was accidentally shoved and landed on the king's leg. He died instantly. For the remainder of his life, he was in prison. Chipollino, his son, came to see him. He discovered that the jail had been constructed with the intention of housing criminals, but now all of the inmates were on hand for the parade, while the innocent and upstanding citizens were confined. Chipollino's father taught him a lot, and he wanted to follow in his footsteps. Nevertheless, he warned him to be wary of the bad folks and that he would learn something from everyone, including them, as he sent him out into the world to see it all. Rather than stay, the Chipollino left. He bumped with Zucchini in a neighboring village, and they struck up a conversation. Chipollino defended him after he was abused by Tomato, thus he accused Tomato of being mean. To retaliate, Tomato yanked his hair and tore some out of his head. Once the onion stench had spread, Tomato's eyes watered, and he rushed away from the scene. Chipollino impressed Zucchini so much that he hired him. Tomato was vengeful, so he returned to the village with a small guard and expelled Zucchini from his residence. They also had a dog chained up inside the house, whose sole duty was to frighten the neighborhood children away. Chipollino put Tomato to sleep and carried the dog to his masters at the castle when he left. Cipollino petted him before vanishing. Zucchini was overjoyed to be home once more. The peasants chose to relocate to the forest because they were terrified of Tomato. Uncle Blueberry protected them as they built their homes there. For the robbers, he put bells on the doors and left messages. After the robbers arrived and went, everyone became pals. Orange was left penniless after he squandered every last cent he had. Orange made plans to visit Cherry's castle with his older cousin, Countess Cherry. Accepted, and Cherry, the younger countess, requested her cousin to join her for a few days. Anger was vented by the countesses on their innocent nephew because of the actions of their cousins. Strawberry, the housekeeper, was his lone solace. When Tomato received a report that Zucchini's residence had been burglarized, he immediately rushed to investigate. He was aided by officers he borrowed from the king in his efforts to capture all men. In the end, only Leek and Chipollino managed to escape. Chipollino and Radish set out to investigate the situation at the castle in order to come up with a plan to free the prisoners from their confinement. It was the next day that Chipollino and Radish visited Cherry's castle where they became friends with their nephew, despite his prohibition against speaking with the peasants. He was having so much fun with his new pals, and the castle was filled with laughter for the first time in a long time. Tomato rushed to the garden to check what was going on when he heard the joyful laughter. He recognized Chipollino when he saw the three of them conversing. When he began screaming, they all took off running. He screamed at his nephew a lot, and the boy became quite upset. Due to the fact that his pals were more carefree than Tomato. He became ill as a result of all the grief. He was evaluated by 4 doctors, but none of them could tell what was wrong with him. They made a phone call to Dr. Chestnut, who was in charge of the plight of the ill. Chestnut came to the conclusion that the only way to deal with his feelings of grief and loneliness was to spend time with his close friends and acquaintances. They exiled him from the palace because everyone was disgusted by his diagnosis. When the villagers were taken into custody, they were imprisoned in the castle's cellar, which was overrun with mice. Their candles had been stolen by mice and they were left in the dark. The convicts were also preparing for the next onslaught as the mice were. They frightened the mice away by making cat noises. Meanwhile, They discovered that walls had ears. Tomato could hear whatever the inmates said thanks to the cell's big ear. Strawberry aided Chipollino by making phone calls to the detainees on a shady line. They were given candles and matches by Chipollino's message. Despite the mice's best efforts, they were repulsed by the inmates. As punishment for their failure, the mice's leader decided to kill each of the mice's 10 soldiers. They held a secret meeting when the dog attacked Chipollino, Radish, and Strawberry. As soon as he captured Chipollino, he called Tomato to inform him of the news. Tomato had Chipollino confined to a hidden cavern by him. When Mole was excavating, she came across Chipollino's pit by accident. When they first met, they exchanged pleasantries before the Mole resumed his work of constructing tunnels beneath the ground. As soon as Tomato emerged from his burrow, Chipollino attacked her. Chipollino was able to converse with other inmates because to Mole's digging in the passageways. A new passageway was dug by Mole as a result of his discussions with her. Suddenly, a match was set off and Mole raced away, stranding the inmates. Chipollino had been arrested, and Strawberry informed the Cherry's nephew. That made him upset, but he eventually stopped sobbing and went to help his friend out. An excellent answer was devised by them. It was a cake that contained sleeping powder that they sent to Tomato. He devoured the entire cake, which made him fall asleep right away. His keys were taken, so she resolved to free all the captives. Strawberry convinced the guards that the convicts had fled and set them on a search for imaginary inmates while the real ones escaped, in order to get them out of prison. When Tomato awoke to find the jail empty, he approached Lemon and his guards to seek for assistance. Peas and Leek were taken into custody by Lemon and his security the following day. Everything in the castle was trashed by the guard. Because Lemon wanted to know where his pals were and where Zucchini's house was hidden, they abused everyone in the castle, especially Leek. Leek chose to remain silent, and as a result, he was sent to the dungeon. They chose to question Peas, his attorney. He shared Leek's faith. Because he had been sentenced to death by hanging, Tomato soon joined Peas. To make matters worse, Peas became overly trusting of Tomato and divulged too much information regarding Zucchini's whereabouts. In order to gain advantage, Tomato told Lemon everything he knew. He hoped that by doing so, he may save his own life. Everything was in place for Peas's hanging in the city's main square. He was pulled into a pit with a noose around his neck. Chipollino was soon being told to cut the rope by someone. Strawberry told Radish, and Radish told Chipollino about Peas' killings, which led to Chipollino telling Strawberry. When Chipollino discovered Mole, she immediately set to work building a tunnel beneath the castle that led to the hangman's noose. Peas had already fallen into the hole when Chipollino arrived, and it was his job to cut the rope around Peas's neck and rescue him. They bolted for the underground cell, where they found everyone safely tucked away. Tomato's treachery was revealed to them by Peas, and Chipollino ran to Uncle Blueberry's house to try to save Zucchini's, but it was too late. Carrot was hired by Lemon and the rest of his gang to assist them track down the escaped convicts. Carrot thought he was on the lookout for deadly pirates, but Radish, who was concerned for the safety of her pals, had given him a dead-end lead. Carrot and his dog ended up dangling from a tree after falling into a trap. After becoming friends with Bear, Chipollino went to see his folks. With Chipollino on his back, Bear set out for a city where Bear's parents were being held captive in a zoo. A lot of creatures there had spent the night pondering their true homes when they first arrived. They got into more difficulties after freeing Bear's parents. When a marine calf heard them, he was compelled to haul because to his animosity of bears. When the guards realized what was going on, they put the 4 of them in cages. Chipollino was eventually freed by Cherry's nephew and the 2 of them set out on their own. They were on an odd railway that only had 1 wagon, seats were windows, and there were bumps in the walls of the wagon for overweight individuals. He was a peculiar man who stopped at every meadow to pick flowers. He was driving a train. Carrot and his dog were freed by a lumberjack in a forest after 3 days of captivity. The game was over after that. Everyone was searching for a specific somebody. Several people were looking for Carrot, Lemon's guards, Grapes and his pack, Chipollino, Grapes, and Chipollino's pack. Mole was looking for everyone. The servants had brought Tangerine and Orange to the palace. Tangerine and Orange set off to find the secret treasure in the basement, and Tangerine brought Orange along. Gluttonous as they may have been, they desired a bottle that turned out to be a pole that unlocked a secret door. When they yanked the bottle, the door swung open, revealing Chipollino and his pals. When Tangerine's room was taken over, Tangerine was locked away in his room, and Orange was left where he was because he was so intoxicated. Due to the fact that they did not have weapons or strategy, some of Cipollino's friends felt nervous. After a long day of fighting, they all retired to sleep, and their adversaries set up camp in the woods. Tomato noticed that someone inside the castle was signaling him as he approached the castle. Tangerine was the flavor. When Tomato went to investigate what was going on, the dog informed him of everything. They resolved to attack the fortress in the early morning after Tomato had relayed everything to Lemon. The battle began early the next morning. The troops was driven from the castle by something enormous and before unseen. I'm not sure how that happened, but Orange got out of there. At this point, most of the soldiers had returned fire. The army was able to gain entry to the fortress and arrest Cipollino because Peas had given Tomato some important information. During his time in prison, Cipollino met up with his father, who comforted him by noting that being locked up forces one to contemplate things that he had never contemplated previously. When Cipollino heard that, he promised to get his father out of prison. Cipollino sent 3 letters and drew a sketch of the prison with the help of the mail carrier Spider. 3 were given to his father, Mole, and Cherry's nephew. As Cipollino's patience with the Spider was wearing thin, he began to lose hope. A lot has happened on Spider's journey to the castle. One of his relatives agreed to accompany him to the castle once they met. Problem was, they came across an enormous crow who swallowed Spider, but Spider got the mailbag and delivered the final letter to his cousin. They were allowed to walk around in the jail, but only in circles. One of the inmates saw an opportunity and plunged into the mole's burrow, using the underground passages to continue his escape. The guard who was assigned to watch over them couldn't count because he wasn't very good at math. They vanished one by one, and he didn't even notice. Even the guard startled and hurried away as they all vanished. A horse race was organized by King Lemon as a means of distracting the populace from contemplating more pressing issues. Cipollino and Mole appeared during the race because they took the wrong turn. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Cipollino snatched Lemon's whip and struck him 3 times. Lemon was so afraid by the ex-prisoners running behind him that he ended up in the trash while fleeing. In the meantime, Tomato collected the rest of the populace and proclaimed a rule requiring the poor to pay taxes on everything, including snow, rain, fog, and sleet. He sought to convince them that the castle's financial situation might be improved with the help of taxes. Lemon was able to make it out of the garbage and made his way to the castle. Even though the storm had ceased, Lemon still desired that it continue to rage so that he could avoid having to face the people. Despite Tomato's predictions of a revolution, no one believed him. Everyone was occupied with something else, and they failed to notice the flag Cipollino had placed in the castle. To take down the flag, Tomato made his way to the castle, but he was unable to go through the door because of his size. Again, he confronted Cipollino, and this time he took out some of his hair and began to weep. If Cipollino hadn't intervened, he likely would have drowned in his own grief. Seeing the flag, Lemon decided to hide among the trash and hope no one would find him. Tangerine and the countesses fled the castle except for him. The castle was transformed into a school and a children's play area. To name just a few: Cipollino, strawberry, zucchini, grapes, lemon, taters, peas, cherries. Characters: Cipollino, the main protagonist of the fable. When Cipollino's father was arbitrarily imprisoned and sentenced to a life in prison, he was angry and decided to embark on a journey. His father had provided him with a wealth of life lessons. The myth doesn't go into about his appearance. He is a happy, bright, and helpful person. When it came to arguing with Tomato, he was bold. He has the belief that every difficulty can be solved because of his goodwill. Acquaintances quickly form around him, and he has a large network of support. He treats the good people well, but he makes the evil ones cry with his kindness and good manners. Cherry's nephew, he lost his parents and the countesses took care of him, or better said took out their anger on him. He sought friendship and freedom because he had to study a lot and everything was banned to him. When he first saw Cipollino and Radish, he was overcome with a strong desire to be with them. Because he was always there for his friends when they needed it, he proved to be a courageous individual. Strawberry, the only friend of Countess's nephew, and she worked as a housekeeper in the castle. Throughout her life, she was a model of virtue, honesty, and wit, and she was a key figure in the movement for justice. Zucchini, a man who grew up dreaming of building a house. Throughout his whole life, he worked tirelessly to complete the project, even going so far as to starve himself for the materials he needed to complete it. It was a tiny amount, but he was satisfied with it. He was content with what he had and didn't want anything more. Grape, He was a shoemaker and loved math. Chipollino's bravery in confronting Tomato impressed him. Lemon, king of this invented land. He had a yellow hat with a bell above it. He was a snob and always ready to get into a fight. He regarded himself as a great leader and acted accordingly. He abused and whipped the animals he owned. Lemon was always looking for someone else to take care of his responsibilities. Even if his requests were at times ludicrous, everyone was eager to satisfy him. Tomato, he was in charge of the castle where the Countess's cherries lived. He was a bully who abused others who were weaker than he. He had a wide, red face and evil-looking eyes. He recognized Chipollino's noble nature during his time in the prison, but it didn't last long. He quickly reverted to his former self-centered nature and tried all it took to escape the dungeon. Peace, he was a lawyer. Tomato exploited him as a guise to control the roost. He turned his back on Tomato when he realized that he was being used. He was always on the lookout for companions that were a better fit for him. Countess's cherries, very rich and owned a lot of houses in almost the entire village. The cousins of both of them frequently came to visit them as they were both widows. They were vicious and had a habit of venting their frustrations and resentment on others. Orange, he had a big stomach and loved to drink and eat a lot. He was left destitute because he devoured his own property. It didn't matter that he solely cared about himself because he couldn't let his genuine self show because he was preoccupied with eating. Tangerine, unlike Orange that loved to eat, Tangerine loved to have different stuff and he was greedy. To the point where, if he doesn't get his way, he threatens to commit himself. Mole, she had a problem with light but despite that she helped save the prisoners. Carrot, he was a detective looking for the escaped prisoners. Spider, he was the jailhouse mailman. He was dedicated to his work, despite the fact that he was unable to walk owing to health concerns. Italian author Gianni Rodari was born in Omigna, a tiny city in northern Italy, in 1920. It wasn't until he was an adult that he began to write children's novels. In Italy, he is often regarded as the country's most important children's novelist. He began his career as an elementary school teacher, then moved on to middle school and high school. That decision was made during World War II in Italy's newspaper L'Unità. The Union is the Italian word for united. His first children's books were written during that time. While creating children's books in many other languages after the 1950s, he only wrote a few English-language books that were afterwards translated into other languages. Cicilline, the book of children's poems, The Blue Arrow, and Gippon the Television are just a few of his most popular works. It was in 1953 that he married Maria Teresa Ferretti, with whom he had his first and only child. He became a full-fledged journalist in the same year he passed the exam. Among other honors, he was awarded the Hans Christian Andersen Medal back in 1970. The greatest honor for a children's book author is this biennial literary award. After a single trip to Russia, his health began to deteriorate. On his return to Rome, he dies in 1980. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.